Good morning. We're about to start the NIFA breakout session for NIFA program specialists as a part of the USDA ERS and NIFA career fair, virtual career fair for Kansas City employment. Bear with us and we'll start in just a few seconds. Good morning. Welcome to the breakout session for NIFA program specialists, part of the USDA Virtual Career Expo for the Economic Research Service and the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. Both agencies recently relocated to Kansas City and the metropolitan area and are seeking qualified candidates for a variety of positions. We held a career expo in K-State at K-State Olathe last year in November and wanted to host another event for job seekers in the Kansas City region. Today you're going to hear specifics about the important work that program specialists do at NIFA and some exciting career opportunities that they have. In addition, representatives from Human Resources Division that serves us, NIFA, are also going to be attending to help answer some HR specific questions. First, a few things about how we're going to operate the webinar today. This webinar is being recorded and it is, and a recording of it, including the closed captioning, will be available at workforusdakc.com. That's USDAKC.com, and the career pages of both ERS and NIFA. Now, all participants are currently muted and will remain that way for the duration of the webinar. Now, if you have a question, please submit it through the Q&A after the during the presentation. Your question may be answered in writing or through the Q&A feature. Or we might do it through, we might answer your question live as we go through the question and answer time. All questions will become part of an FAQ document that we're going to post online. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Sivapathisen Sureshwaran. We all call him Suresh at USDA, and really all NIFA and all over USDA. And he is NIFA's acting deputy director over NIFA's Institute of Youth, Family, and Communities. Suresh, please feel free to start your introduction.
Sure, good morning, welcome. We have a group of 4 of us who will have short presentations, and then we will have more than 30 minutes for questions and answers at the end. Next slide. First question is, who are we? What is NIFA? NIFA is the lead federal agency providing extramural funding for food and agricultural sciences. We provide money through grants, cooperative agreements, and other kinds of financial funding to colleges, universities, small businesses, and individuals to support food, agriculture, natural resources kinds of activities. We were formed by restructuring through the Food Conservation and Energy Act. We have approximately $1.8 billion appropriations in fiscal year 2020. We provide both competitive and capacity funding. We will explain these a little bit more in detail later. Competitive is through a peer review process and capacity funding is through formulas. Our mission is to support agricultural research, education, and extension. Vision is to catalyze transformative discoveries, education, and engagement to address agricultural challenges. Next slide. how do we function? Congress and administration and stakeholders and partners determine priorities and funding through Congress. When we get funding, we publish something called request for applications on our website and on grants.gov, asking for application, giving a deadline, and we receive the application. We establish a peer review panel. Peer review panels could be professionals from small businesses, universities, and other areas, and other agencies too, and small businesses. We determine what projects to fund, we provide grants, and then we provide financial management and oversight. Are you doing what you are supposed to do, what you have written you will do in the application? Next slide. Next slide. And another question that most of you will be interested in is, where are we located? The US Department of Agriculture headquarters is in Washington, D.C. We used to be in Washington, D.C., and on September 27th last year, we relocated to Kansas City. Very soon, we will be moving to a permanent location, and that's the map that's shown here. And I'm going to now pass it on to the next person, and that's Carlos.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do as an agency. So NIFA's role in the agricultural enterprise is very much to fund three main activities. We fund research, which is to provide answers to complex societal issues. We fund education that supports school, universities, really from the K through the postgraduate level, in order to train the agricultural workforce, as well as we fund extension activities, which very much means to pass the knowledge that we have gained through research into society, so into the workforce, bring everything from theory to actual practice. Some of the programs that NIFA have, I often tell people to tell me what do they do, and we'll tell them how that fits within the agricultural enterprise. I think there's a click on that, Mandy. Yeah, so really, like, the activities that we fund within this enterprise are very varied. As you can see in this slide, we fund bioenergy, animal topics, business topics, markets and trade, for example. We fund crop production, community vitality. We are the national partner for the 4-H program, the federal partner for 4-H. We have global activities. We really like, so when you look at this slide, I challenge you to say, well, what do I do and where does that fit within the activities that NIFA supports? Next slide, please. So as Bill and Suresh were mentioning, our programs are divided in two big, huge categories. One of the largest ones is what we call capacity programs. Capacity programs are also known as formula programs. And what they are is they support research or extension at land-grant universities. Land-grant universities are some of our biggest partners. We call them 1862s, 1890s, or 1994s, depending on what type of legislation actually gave them access to funds. So 1862s are the usually large research universities. 1890s are the historically Black colleges or Black African-American universities, mainly in the South. And the 1994s are tribal universities. So these are called formula funds because based on enrollment, based on state data, each one of these institutions get a slice of the amount of funds that we receive for these programs. Only the institutions that are part of the 1862s, 1890s, or 1994 legislations are the ones eligible for these programs. And very much the idea of this is that we are trying to forge a partnership between the federal, state, and local entities to really bring up the research, extension, and education activities to a bigger impact. Next slide, yeah. And the other big part that we have, and that's where personally I work the most, is on the competitive programs. As Suraj mentioned, competitive programs will typically need a peer review. So one of the main things that we do at NIFA is a peer review process. And we use this process to really evaluate proposals that we receive in order to fund research, extension, education, or integrated. So what we call integrated are those projects that contain more than one of those functions. So it could be research and education, education and extension, the three of them, or any of the mix between these three functions. The eligibility for competitive programs really is going to change according to the program that you are targeting. So some of them will be only for land-grant universities. Others will be based on a regional basis when you think about the insular area. So this will be all the US territories. Some others will be depending on, maybe some of the characteristics of the institutions. So that will be like Hispanic serving institutions or tribal programs, or their capacity to carry out an extension program. So that'll be a land grant and so on. So some of the examples that we have on these competitive programs, the biggest one will be AFRI, which is the Agricultural Food Research Initiative, which is our largest umbrella program. Within AFRI, we have many, many programs. And this initiative is about $500 million that we use for this. It funds broad activities, and it has foundational projects. We also fund many education activities. So the pre-doctoral, postdoctoral fellowships are there. And really this is kind of like our research heavy programs. We have SBIR, which is a Small Business Innovation Research. These are small business projects. They support, which the name is in the name, is a support innovative research for commercialization. It has two phases. It's a very, very interesting program because you really see what's on the pipeline in the research and how this can be applied. And oftentimes, you'll see the products being on the market that have been supported by SBIR. SBIR is not a NIFA only program, it's a federal government wide, but we manage the agricultural side of SBIR. We also have a program for non-land grant colleges. These are about $5 million. Some of our funding changes based on what the appropriations are for that year. And in the case of the non-land grant colleges, which we call NLGCAs, these are highly targeted applications to education and extension workforce development projects for institutions who have now very much applied agricultural programs, but they are not land grant universities. So that means that they don't have, Congress hasn't passed an authorization for them to be named a land grant university, but they still have a big, big role in the development and training of agricultural workforce. I think that's, yeah.
Thanks, Carlos. And as a brief introduction, Carlos is a national program leader at NIFA. Until recently, he was a program specialist for about 3 years. The next speaker is Kelly McDonald, who is also a program specialist currently.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. As Steve said, my name is Kelly McDonald, and I have been a program specialist with NIFA for almost 3 years now. And while 3 years may not sound like a very long time, in those short few years, I've had the opportunity to do many different things and serve in a broad capacity within the agency, which I will talk a little bit about here. Next slide. So when I began thinking about the role of the program specialist at NIFA, I found it really hard to sum up with one description or analogy, because the reality is that no two program specialists do exactly the same thing, and no 2 days are exactly the same for a specialist. That being said, while we each take on different projects and roles, we ultimately perform the same core functions that support the peer review cycle, which in summary is shown here. From helping draft requests for applications, to preparing for panels, to responding to data requests, we really do it all. Our role is broad, and we work to provide support wherever it may be needed. Next slide. So we could take a look at the expectations of the program specialist role through the core performance elements shown here in the blue boxes, all of which help us support the peer review cycle again. I'd like to just touch on a few that stand out to me as a specialist. The first one being customer service. In everything we do, we remember our role as a public servant, and our role is really to serve our customers. whether it be responding promptly to an email, returning a phone call in a timely fashion, or just helping solve an issue a grantee may be having. We as program specialists always have customer service in the front of our minds. From personal experience, and I can tell you that they do appreciate this, so we take that very importantly. Let's see, what else? We get to form relationships with our grantees, and we always want their experience with us to be positive. One way we do that is through teamwork, which is also highlighted here. We won't always know the answer to every question or be able to solve every problem, so it's really important that we get to build effective networks and working relationships with colleagues, and that we know who to turn to in order to get an answer or to solve that problem. This is really critical as a specialist. And I can tell you that many days, most of my time is spent responding to inquiries from potential applicants and grantees. And many of these I don't know the answer to. So knowing where to go and to find that information, or where in the system we can go to assist them, really becomes a skill that a specialist learns over time and through experience. The second element I'd like to really speak on is leadership and management. And when thinking of the peer review cycle and going from RFA to award, specialists really are the wheels that keep the bus rolling. We do take ownership on our programs and make sure that each step along the way is completed. And there are many steps. Attention to detail and organization are critical skills that is very easy, even for those that have been around for a while and gone through many grant cycles, very easy to miss a step along the way. So being able to think on your feet and solve problems on the fly is something we do often. Whether you are running a live or a virtual panel, problems are always inevitable. So being able to predict potential issues and mitigate them when they arise makes for a great program specialist. We also work in many different systems, and being able to navigate them is really key to our job. Again, thinking about customer service, we work closely with panelists during the review period to make sure that they are set up for success in their reviews. This includes providing detailed instructions as well as providing technical assistance in accessing our systems. When we think about professional development, there really is a lot of latitude as a specialist to pursue the skills and training that interest you. And I have found that this is really be the fun part of being a specialist. So aside from the expectations outlined in your performance plan, you really have the ability to create your own expectations. So if you find yourself interested in a particular aspect of the job or a particular program, you can talk to your supervisor, see what training you may be able to take, or a conference that you might be able to attend. And I found that supervisors truly give you the freedom to explore what you're interested in, join committees or working groups that you want, as well as explore continuous process improvement, which is something we do at NIFA. CPI, we think about often in our roles, and it's something we also discuss in our program specialist meetings, which are typically held every 2 weeks. Here we can discuss our ideas or ask questions with other specialists, and it's really been a great support network for us. Leadership is always open to suggestions and encourage innovative thinking in this regard. So I found that being able to take leadership in my role has been one of the most rewarding aspects of being a specialist to me. Next slide. And while some of the current vacancies are highlighted here, the program specialist role really does cross disciplines and institutes. We really work together to achieve the missions and must be willing to step up when needed. So having a broad knowledge of the agency is truly important. And I think that's it for me. So I'll pass it on to Mallory.
The next speaker is Mallory Coney, who also joined the agency as a program specialist and recently got promoted as a national program leader. Thanks, Mallory.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to touch on part of what we feel is great about working with NIFA. NIFA is a group of people who truly are passionate about our mission and supporting research, education, and extension across the country. The programs that we work on, like Carlos mentioned, they have such a breadth of impact, whether it's K through 12 education, pre and postdoctoral support of students in the education and workforce pipeline, something that might be specific to an area of research interest, or even in the Small Business Innovation Research Program, the opportunity to see that research be applied to a consumer product and released on the market. So these impacts are wide-reaching, and it's very fulfilling work. And certainly something that we all enjoy on a daily basis. While we're really catalysts of the innovation, the achievements, the education being conducted by our partners, we work very closely with our partners on a daily basis. Just like Kelly said, majority of her day is working with our either people who are interested in applying with our programs or our current awardees, our partners in extension. We're here to be supportive and really facilitate the work that they're doing to move our agricultural sciences and our agricultural enterprise forward. I'd also like to talk about some career opportunities within NIFA. As Suresh mentioned, I started NIFA as a program specialist about 5 years ago. I started in the Institute of Food Safety and Nutrition. I'm a nutritional scientist by training. And there, as a program specialist, I knew coming in to NIFA that I wanted to build a career here. This is a wonderful organization. I'm passionate about the work, and from day one, I knew I wanted to be able to grow and give back to this organization. And so I started that, like Kelly said, very openly with my supervisor, saying that this is my area of science that I'm really passionate about. I'd love to support programs in it, and continue to build myself as a scientist in that way. And so I came up from a program specialist, then to a program coordinator, and recently to a national program leader. So there are paths within our scientific institutes that most people will think of initially, and the 4 institutes I've taken the opportunity to show them here: the Institute of Bioenergy, Climate, and the Environment, Institute of Food Production and Sustainability, Institute of Food Safety and Nutrition, and the Institute of Youth, Family, and Community. Beyond that, as many of our speakers have mentioned, the program specialist role is one where you can truly, focus it into areas that you have the greatest passion and interest. So there are program specialists who have had a passion for one function or another within NIFA and have pursued career paths in those areas. So what I would like to highlight here is, if you look at the staff in the Office of Director, we have 2 very prominent staff members who started as program specialists. So Bill Hoffman started as a program specialist, Kim Whittick started as a program specialist. And so with their passion for operations and policies and processes, they pursued that and continued in a career ladder in operations. We've had program specialists who are absolutely driven by the impacts of our stakeholders and get very engaged in that, and have taken advantage of opportunities to communicate our impacts on a much higher level, and have joined our communication staff. Like Kelly said, program specialists work very closely with awardees on some project-specific information related to the scope of the project, but also are answering questions and identifying those answers for financial management questions. So we've had program specialists really become passionate about the financial management aspects, and then pursue more training, more information, more experiences in those lines, and transition over to our Office of Grants and Financial Management, becoming branch chiefs and team leads there. The same can be said for policy over in that unit. The work that program specialists do in preparing requests for applications, for many can spark a new career interest that can be developed. And of course, for many people as well, there's a lot of really rewarding analysis that we get to do as program specialists of the accomplishments of our programs and even that continuous process improvement that Kelly mentioned that can really lend someone to develop themselves to be a strong candidate for a position in our planning, accountability, and reporting staff units as well. So there's many opportunities for someone to build a career with NIFA and pursue paths of their own interest. I would also share that a career with NIFA allows someone to be part of the broader USDA family, meaning that when you're thinking about professional development opportunities, there can be details within NIFA, there can be details within the broader USDA family for people to really hone those skills as well. And I'll go ahead and turn it back to my co-hosts, and we'll be happy to take your questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mallory. And this is our last slide. And there are some couple of additional resources that you can use if you are interested in applying for employment at NIFA. I would also like to take this leave this slide on in place, but take this opportunity to ask Daniel to introduce himself. Daniel?
You're muted, Daniel.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I apologize for that. My name again is Dan Vasquez, and I am a human resources specialist. So any questions anyone has in regards to the recruitment process and the different job opportunities, please feel free to ask.
Bill, back to you for questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Suresh. And we do have a few questions in the question box. The first one is from Monica. How is the success of a program specialist measured? Which of you would like to chime in on that one?
I will start first.
Go ahead, Suresh.
We have annual performance reviews. This is a contract that we established at the beginning of the year. We write in metrics about how performance will be measured at the end of the year. And then the supervisor, who is often for a program specialist, it's the division director, and the program specialist sits together, discusses achievements, accomplishments during the year, and they rate the staff. There is discussion that the performance review process for next year at USDA is going to change. It will still continue to involve the supervisors and program specialists. Anyone else who wants to jump in from the panel?
Just to follow up on the performance plans and elements, that was what I had highlighted in those blue boxes, or some of the core elements that you would be evaluated on. And of course, there's more detail regarding them, but those are some of the things I briefly touched upon.
Thank you very much. The next question is from Shannon King. For those of you that began as program specialists, what was your educational background / work experience to begin as a program specialist? And I'll begin with that one. I got finished up my grad school, got with an MBA, went into the ag chemical business, and from there went to cooperative extension at Penn State University. And I was with Penn State Extension for about 5 years. And of course, Penn State Extension is funded by the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. And so that's what led me to begin my federal portion of my career as a program specialist. I'll call on a few others. Mallory, tell us about your story.
Absolutely. So I Joined NIFA as a program specialist with my educational background being in nutritional sciences. I'm a PhD trained nutritional scientist. I'm also a registered dietitian nutritionist. And so I had, throughout all of that training, and also I had done a couple of postdocs before coming to NIFA, but all of that training had been in the land grant university system. And I'd also had the opportunity in my training to work with people who had joint appointments in research and extension as well. So I had been exposed to what cooperative extension looked like, and my graduate research was funded by Hatch and the National Research Initiative, which preceded AFRI. My postdocs were funded under the Agriculture, Food and Research Initiative. So for me, it was really a wonderful connection. I had been involved with our Hatch multi-state research groups that NIFA also supports. So those wonderful broad networks of experts across the country tackling some complex issues. So that was my experience and my background before I came to NIFA.
Carlos.
Sure. I'm a plant pathologist by training. So before I came to the agency, I was doing a postdoc, and I was fortunate enough to also be a reviewer in our peer review panels. So I was very much familiar with, interestingly also, during my undergrad, my first research experience was actually funded through a NIFA program, or in the, our predecessor agency. So so I was doing a postdoc before I came to the agency as a program specialist, and I served in that role for about 3.5 years before my current position.
Thank you. And Kelly, your educational background, become a program specialist.
Sure. My bachelor's degree is in environmental science and biology, and I got my master's in forestry. And then I ended up working in the private sector in construction, oddly enough, before finding the job at NIFA. And I found that having the educational and research background as well as the private sector background really set me up for success in this position.
Thank you, Kelly. I'll move on to the next question from Jeanette Schaefer. Are program specialists also grant project officers responsible for budgets, et cetera? And Carlos, I'd like you to take this one and talk about the differences between program specialists and grant specialists.
Sure. So what we, as program specialists, we are more responsible to the programmatic aspects of a project. So how are the activities going to be carried? If it's a research activity, what are the goals that the research project will have? Not so much the financials, but we still keep track of how a project is being developed or is being carried out, and if they're using their funds in accordance with what was originally proposed. We are not so much in charge of, actually counting the monies every day and just keeping tab of, the allowable or not allowability of some of the costs, but it's more about in a semi-annual or annual basis, is the project moving, aka are they achieving their goals, and is that reflected on the funds that we allocated to them? If they're not using the funds, we may have to be doing some things and reach out and say, hey, so what's going on with your project? So we are not, as a program specialist, you're not in charge of the financials, as a thing, but you have to be highly aware of those. The grant specialist, which is in part of our Office of Grants and Management, they are the ones in charge of looking at the allowability of mostly the budget part. Like, they take care of that financial part the most.
Thank you, Carlos. That was a very good explanation. There are two questions that I'm going to kind of try to merge into one. Nancy is very interested in the Institute of Youth, Family, and Community and what current opportunities are available. And Lindsay notes that currently there are no program specialists listed on the USA Jobs website. From a IYFC standpoint, Suresh, and also an agency-wide standpoint, what are the current opportunities available within IYFC that you anticipate coming on board, and also the rest of the agency as far as program specialists go?
Thanks, Bill. We are working on a position description and an advertisement that should be posted very soon, within a few weeks, I'm guessing, to hire program specialists in many of our institutes. In IYFC, the work we do is primarily with education, minority serving institutions, workforce development, youth, 4-H, rural development, beginning farmer training to some extent, and health and related activities. We expect to have several vacancies for program specialists in education, minority serving institutions, 4-H. So if you have some experience, some interest in any of these topics, that's the institute for you. But the work you do across the agency is pretty similar. Program specialists really help national program leaders administer programs. So even if you don't have directly relevant experience, you will be able to apply to other units or to IYFC and be successful in your position.
Thank you, Suresh. A related question is, will you be filling multiple position, program specialist positions from one announcement? I'm having trouble getting the words out of my mouth this morning. The answer to that question is yes. We will post a single announcement and for program specialists, and regardless of your background, we'll look at your background and we'll be able to tell you where you might be able to best fit within our agency. And it might not be where you think. Carlos came to us as a plant pathologist, but he really excelled with some of our youth, family, and community programs, particularly our educational programs. And that's where he really got a lot of his success that took him where he was today. So we'll figure out your background if you apply for a program specialist position. And then, of course, we'll have a conversation with you about different areas. And we might bring up something that you may not have thought of, but you might want to pursue as a career. Here's one for Daniel. I have non-competitive eligibility. Is there a special way that I can apply for program specialist positions? And I assume, Daniel, we would list those both as multiple, both competitive and non-competitive. Could you tell the questioner how that process works?
Sure, Bill, thank you. When we post the vacancy announcements, and I believe Suresh mentioned that they will be coming in a couple of weeks, they'll be posted for folks who are competing for the job and folks who also have non-competitive hiring authority. And they'll just simply indicate that on their application package. One other thing I wanted to piggyback on is, I think I've seen a couple of questions about there may not be those program specialist announcements out there right now. But what they can do is they can build a search agent, what it used to be called on USA Jobs, and it'll alert them when a job is opened that matches their search criteria. For example, they can plug in program specialist and the geographic locations, etc.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
The clarity on that. There's a couple of people, and I'll combine some of these questions, and I'll throw it to Suresh, and I'll let you go to the other panelists if you like. Person spent his career in financial services, and has been successful in that field. They were from a rural community. Their neighbor was a county extension advisor from Illinois. you know, where would you see him as fitting in as a program specialist? And also Jared Campbell asked, Jared is looking to make a career industry move to NIFA from a different sector. What are you looking for on that resume to help that candidate stand out as a program specialist?
It depends on your knowledge, experience with using technology, for example. If you have that, please list and identify where you got that experience. That is extremely important because program specialists use technology to screen applications, have webinars, and conduct other data analysis activities. There is another possibility. There is a vacancy that I think will happen soon for the Small Business Innovation Research Grants Program. If you have experience with small businesses, if you are interested in working with Small Business Innovation Research Grants, that is a possibility. And then you have to highlight that kind of experience either in your letter or in a narrative somewhere if you can't highlight that in your application. A third group of, I think, perhaps is the Institute of Youth, Family and Communities. We fund so many activities across NIFA, like Carlos works in this unit, he's a plant scientist. We felt that recruiting him to the Institute was an asset because he brought in a totally different dimension that we needed to emphasize in education programs. So if you have another unique dimension, which we have to emphasize in education programs, you might be selected for the Institute of Youth, Family and Communities.
Suresh, if I could add on to that.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of transferable skills that make a program specialist very successful. You know, program specialists interact with a lot of databases. You know, that's experience that can come from many different sectors. Additionally, experience with complex processes, managing multiple projects at once, needing diverse and changing deadlines, as well as, you know, a lot of working on teams. All of that can be critical experience that makes program specialists successful and can come from many other sectors.
I think if I piggyback on that, I have like my 5, you know, top skills that I see as, for a successful program specialist. And I think that you have to be highly organized, as Mallory mentioned, because we as program specialists work in multiple programs and all of them happen at the same time. So you have to have a lot of attention to detail. Many of the things that we do are public facing. So you are a representative of the department. So any interaction that you have with a grantee, with an applicant, you have to really have an attention to detail when you tell them a deadline, when you tell them an amount of, you know, funding opportunity or whatever the data may be. As Mallory mentioned, you have to be highly flexible, but also very responsive. Things happen all the time, and somebody has described program specialists before as the glue in the agency that kind of we try to keep everything together and moving the projects along. Therefore, you have to be able to multitask. And the last one, I believe, and it's also a very important one, is you have to be actually very curious to know the things that we do within the agency. How can we move things forward, and where you can actually optimize some of our processes. So to me, those are the 5 ones that are, in order to be a successful program specialist, you have to master those 5 skills. And that will help you, you know, really do a great job at your job. And then, you know, from there, other opportunities like the ones that Mallory was describing could rise up, not even just within the agency, but, you know, across NIFA and the federal government, across USDA and federal government.
Thank you both. Our next question is from Stephen Green. For any of the presenters that are current or former program specialists, can you give an example of a program you supported that was personally rewarding to you, and why so? And I'm going to start out with Kelly McDonald, because I know that she has a great one on that.
Yeah, so I am heavily involved with the Small Business Innovative Research Program, which has definitely been extremely rewarding, especially recently. I've been the point contact for that program. And pretty much every day I get at least 5 phone calls from potential applicants, as well as grantees, really interested in the program and looking for assistance and how to apply and what's required. And when you're talking to these people, I mean, this is their lifeblood, is these grants and this program to get their business off the ground. Some of them have a great idea and they just don't know what to do with it or how to move it forward. So being able to provide assistance, walk them through the application process, tell them what they need to do, where they need to register, it really is a rewarding experience for me. And oftentimes they call me back and say, hey, I have a question. And I mean, I feel like I know these people even though I've never met them, and we really built a solid relationship. So for me, that's definitely the most rewarding program I've worked with.
And Mallory, I think I know what you will say, but I'll let you say it.
Absolutely. So I shared that I came to my current role through being the program coordinator, and I was the program coordinator for the Expanded Food Nutrition Education Program. And for those of you who may not be familiar, this program is delivered by 76 of our land grant institutions across the country. And so this is a program that works directly with limited resource, youth and families. And I could give examples for the next hour of all the ways in which this program has been so impactful in like truly changing people's lives. I'll give one. We have one team member who started out as a participant in FNAP, and the skills that she acquired to when it came to food resource management, health and nutrition for her family, enabled her to not only bring her family out of poverty, but she loved FNAP so much she later became an FNAP peer educator, a paraprofessional, and grew from a paraprofessional to a regional supervisor, from a regional supervisor to the FNAP program coordinator at her institution. And so these are just remarkable people who have made such a broad impact, right? And you go from one person to an impact that stretches across the entire community. So that would be an example I would give.
Carlos?
Sure. So as Bill mentioned, my background is in plant pathology, but really what I find where I think my niche is in the education world. So I work with education programs, and that means that I have, contact with students. So I think 2 summers ago, while in this office, one of the batch of summer student interns, and I heard that somebody was looking for me. And after a while, this young lady found me, and she said that she wanted to introduce herself because one of the programs that I support or that I work on had actually supported her undergraduate career. Now she had graduated and she was going to start her master's at the University of Maryland. So to me, that was a highly touching, because it's not just a number, it's not just a name that you read. You actually get to meet these people. I also worked on the fellowship program. So you get to see how students move from, undergraduates or doing their graduate degree, and then all of a sudden they become faculty that then you bring back to do a peer review process. So to me, it's just that relationship. So I think that's one of the reasons that, as Suresh and Bill mentioned, like I enjoy the Institute of Youth, Family and Community just because it's not just, I'm talking about people here, and you're really affecting lives. As I mentioned before, one of the the programs that I was involved as a program specialist was a program that supported my first research experience when I was an undergrad. So how much more gratifying can it be that now you are having a role in leading a program that has an effect on people because it has had that effect on yourself.
Thank you, Carlos. And I guess I get to play too. My favorite program that I worked with, I have 2, but I'll make the hard choice and say I got to work with 90,000 extension master gardeners across the country that we fund through our capacity programs, and seeing some of the work that they do in their communities is just great. And all all that they really needed as far as leadership was, just a little bit of kind of direction and the ability to have people notice what they were doing and the ability to highlight that program on a national level is really what the main thing that I did, but they were just fabulous people to work with. We have a question on technical skills. And, Tyler asks, is success as a researcher expected to translate as well as to serving as a program specialist? And, and another anonymous attendee has a master's degree with high research emphasis. And a third asked about, postdocs and, could you talk just a little bit about research skills transferring to being a good program specialist? And I will call on Dr. Ortiz, since he is probably has the most research credentials under his belt before coming to NIFA.
Sure. So I think your analytical skills, your way of really, you need to be quite proficient on digging through our databases through, I'm not gonna lie, and I will say that when I first moved, so I was doing a postdoc before coming to the agency. And when I moved to NIFA, what we do as an agency is highly administrative. So you will not be doing research anymore, but it's highly administrative. So when I first joined, I was just like, ooh, what did I do? I just completely changed my career. What did I just do? I moved from Texas to Washington, DC. And, I will say for maybe a week or two, I kind of struggled to see where my career was leading. After a while, I started getting these requests about what my supervisor asked, are we supporting any biotechnology programs? And he said, I searched for the word biotechnology, the databases, and I'm getting only this number of projects. I'm sure we're supporting more. So that's when I have to put my scientist hat and say, well, what are the hot topics in science? And that's really when you start looking at, maybe at that time was CRISPR, maybe it was, a biotech, some other sorts of biotechnology that maybe your science research are the ones that bring you those, you have that that foot still in the field and you understand what all of these terms mean. So a lot of that is just, that your data analysis, the way of really seeing something from where it starts, where it's supposed to lead, when you get a lot of projects and their proposals, really making sure that oftentimes you can provide some of the feedback as we develop the request for applications. These requests for applications are written by us in the program staff. So when you're saying that you want to support science, you should know a little bit about the science and how things are done. I oftentimes, working with the fellows program, I push for, different salaries or different, supporting, because you have a taste of how things are done in the academic world. So I think the data analysis are the biggest skills that are transferable from what we do.
Thank you, Carlos. We have many questions in the chat that I will refer to our HR folks. If you can be monitoring the chat and answer some of the more HR-centric questions, I would appreciate that. And I will go next to one of the first questions that we have. Clay asks, what does a typical day look like for a program specialist at NIFA? Kelly, I know there are no typical days, but what does a typical day look like?
Yeah, that's a tough question. And it really depends on where you are in the grant cycle and for your programs. But one thing that is for certain every single day are the emails and the phone calls from your applicants and your grantees. And a lot of times they just have questions for the applicants, what are the requirements for the program? How do they apply? What are the deadlines? Basic questions like that. Your grantees may be contacting you about a request they submitted and want to know the status, those types of questions. So a lot of it is just being responsive via telephone and email. And like I said, depending on where you are in the grant cycle, depends on what your daily assignments are going to be. So to give you an example for where I am right now, I'm finishing up our SBIR phase 1. So that's my days are preparing our award jackets, collecting documents from our grantees and getting them down to our award staff to process. And at the same time, we have our SBIR phase 2 deadline approaching at the end of May. So I'm handling a lot of phone calls and emails from potential applicants interested in the program, wanting to know if they would be eligible and to talk about their ideas. So the tasks, I mean, like I said, they vary by day, and you have to know how to prioritize what comes in and what you handle first. But that's just a little glimpse into what my days are looking like right now and some of the different things you're handling.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate that. Got a question. We have time for a few more questions. I'm going to direct this one to Mallory, and because I know that she's had some great mentors. Can you speak to the training / onboarding process, i.e. mentors? Mallory, could you address that?
Sure. So I would say, I guess I'll start with a couple of things. So when it comes to training and onboarding, NIFA has put together a comprehensive and rigorous training for program specialists, which is wonderfully beneficial. And so think of that as kind of like your initial intensive. And then Kelly has mentioned that, we have regular program specialist meetings where everyone continues to really hone their skills and focus on a lot of ways that we can optimize what we're doing and do it more efficiently. So that's going on, constantly. And also, I would say separate from that, that's also occurring simultaneously is that NIFA has a mentor-mentee program. So that was something that I took advantage of, early on when I joined the agency. I signed up for the mentor-mentee program. I got paired with a mentor, that I shared my goals with, and it was someone who could help me look at, what my plan was, how I would get there, what are some ways that I could really, enhance myself to be most competitive. So I certainly took advantage of having that external mentor, in addition to the mentors that were naturally available to me through my supervisory chain of command, and of course my colleagues. So that's a tool that I really appreciated myself. There's lots of mentoring and opportunities through our scientific societies as well, and broadly USDA, that I would really recommend people take advantage of, especially for special, if you want to get into some of these special interest groups within USDA. It's wonderful networks and wonderful support of early career professionals.
Thank you, Mallory. I'm going to come right back to you. What are the qualifications that would make for a strong applicant in the Institute of Food Production and Sustainability? Casey would like to know.
All right, I might call on some extra support for IFPS. For food production and sustainability, I'm certainly going to echo highlighting all the skills we've already talked about. Right, you can be flexible, you can be adaptable. You've got the database, data analytical skills. You've got the ability to do self-driven, independent work, as well as function well and be very supportive of a team environment, which we do. And then broadly in IFPS, I would say there's lots of opportunities for you to apply your background to whether it's soil science, plant health, animal health and welfare, bioeconomics, sociology, statistics. So there are a couple of areas in IFPS that maybe I haven't already mentioned. Veterinary medicine, for sure.
Okay, thank you very much, Mallory. We'll wrap up with one or two more questions. question about transitioning from another agency. Suresh, could you talk about some of the successful people that have transitioned from other agencies?
Yes, if you are at GS7 or below, the program specialist positions start at GS9, 11, and 12. You can transition parallel. If you're at GS9, you can move to a GS9, or if you are at GS11, you can move to a GS11. You can also go up if you have adequate experience to move up to a higher level. The main thing to be successful at NIFA is whether you have the education and experience relevant for administering grant programs, moving the science forward, and addressing customer needs. I think Carlos and Mallory talked about the different skills needed to be successful. And if you do have the skills needed to be successful, it's easy for you to transfer and move up and be successful as a program specialist.
And we'll wind this up with the last question. Mercedes would like to know, is there a position below program specialist? I don't have an advanced degree. We are, there is a position below this. It's a program assistant. Suresh, is that correct?
That's right.
Yes, program assistant. And we expect to be putting out some position description availabilities and posting them on USA Jobs. I would look for those, later in the summer. I think our national program leader and program specialists are going to come first because there's a great need for those, and the program assistants will probably follow that that role. So with that last question, I would like to thank. Oh, go ahead, Carlos.
There's one question that I think is actually very important. It says, can you speak more about diversity and culture of the work environment within the department?
Oh, I missed that one. I'm sorry, Carlos. Go
That's
ahead.
actually very important because, I mean, I am very excited to work for the agency. I think from all the speakers who are in today, of us moved from Washington, D.C., decided to relocate from Washington, D.C. and follow the agency to Kansas City. So it's a small agency. We're about, what is the number? Like 400 people, or that's the idea. And we're rebuilding. And I think, it is highly diverse. To be at a USDA agency, NIFA is highly diverse. And the work environment, I think we treat each other more like a family. When we all moved to Kansas City, I remember the first day back in the office, it was more about kind of like, when you have been out of school for the whole summer, and then you come back the first day and you go, hey, how was your move? How have you been? Where in the city are you now? So it has that small family feeling that really, and you really know everybody within the agency. And I really enjoy it. I don't know if anyone else kind of want to chip in, but I think it has a great culture. It's highly diverse. And that's one of the reasons of why I decided to, pack up my stuff and move from Washington, D.C. to Kansas City.
Carlos, thank you. And you leave it to somebody who trained as a program specialist to know when to jump in and say, hey, wait, you're missing something. And so thank you for that, Carlos. And thank you to all of our panelists. And thank you to our participants today. I think this was a really great session. It was well thought out. There was great participation. For those that have questions that we have not answered, we will consider your questions for the for frequently asked questions document. I hope that each and every one of you have a good rest of your day and stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Bill?